Hey, bucket listers, welcome.
Welcome to the Bucket List Life Podcast with Trav Bell, the world's #1 bucket list expert. Bucket List Life's mission is to help you get off the treadmill, stop Groundhog Days, hack your habits, and live a regret-free life. Because we know life's way too short not to live your bucket list life. So please welcome your host, Trav Bell, the Bucket List Guy.
Hey, bucket listers, welcome to another episode of the Bucket List Life Podcast. That was the little intro. I hope you loved it. Hey, look, we are going live on a bunch of different channels right now, so please feel free to get involved. This is going to be such an interesting chat. I'm stoked that we've got David on today to talk everything about systems. I love systems, and we're going to dive straight into it. But if you're on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, I don't know, the others, there's a bunch of them, but please get involved, give us your comments, ask some questions, subscribe if you haven't, of course, share it, get involved. This is all about the content, and it's going to be amazing content today. This is all about, Bucket List Life Podcast is about getting really interesting people on that I'm interested in having conversations with. Forget about you, the audience, but what I'm interested in. No, and I've just got so many interesting people in my life, and I come across some really interesting conversations, and that's how Bucket List Life Podcast was started. Inspiring, interesting conversations shared, so hopefully you get something out of it today. So, guys, let's get into it. David Jenyns, is that how I say your name? Jenyns? I got that right?
Close. It's Jenyns. It's a strange one. I always have to say to get it right, though.
Look, we're going to call you the systemologist from now on, David. I think thanks so much for jumping on, mate. You're in Melbourne. I'm in. Yes, and we're hopefully just about to come out of our 5th lockdown here. I'm in Ocean Grove, so only about an hour and a half away down the coast, and. I think there's no better time to read this book, your book, SYSTEMology. And there we go. There it is there. It was a fantastic book. There it is. And I'll tell you why in a second from my point of view. It's a timely book because really collectively, we've all been given this big global collective deep breath in, to recalibrate. And I think what better way to recalibrate, if you're in business, recalibrate and get rid of the old, bring in the new, and then systemize maybe your way out of where you are or onto the next phase or bring in something new. I think your book is really, really timely. I don't know how long it's been out for, mate, but I included this as part of one of my bucket list challenges, which is reading 52 books in a year. The one I read just before yours, and I think you know this.
Yes, I know
it
well.
Rocket Fuel. There we go. And then it was yours, and then literally this one, The Psychology of Money, which is really interesting as well. We're not talking about them, we're talking about this. All right, mate, quick question. I ask this of every guest is when we used to flying these things called airplanes, and we travel internationally or land back in Australia, and you have to put on the incoming passenger card what your occupation is. What do you put now that you've systemized your way out of everything? And what do you put down as your occupation?
Owner. I say business owner. Yeah.
Right. Cool. Some people come up with some creative things to describe themselves, which I think gets them in more trouble than it's worth. But so business owner, where did the obsession of systems come from for you?
I think the obsession has been around for a very long time. One of the very first memories I have about business systemization, or the first system that I ever saw, was my dad created this thing he called the sheet for my brother and I. He was
this is nuts.
Yeah, so I was.
How did you? Can you just describe this thing?
I was 6 years old. My brother was 8 years old, and my dad created this elaborate scoring system where we could earn points for cleaning the bird cage, being good to our brother, making sure that we didn't knock his guitar, what time we went to bed, saying prayers, all these sorts of things. And what would end up happening? Yeah, there you go, screenshot of it.
That is actually in there on the DOS on printed out on the DOS Matrix printer, I think.
That's exactly what it was.
Yeah, mate. This is hardcore. Please go on. It's fascinating.
And we'd earn points throughout the week, and then those points would get tallied up at the end. And then there was a legend on the final page that would calculate our pocket money. And I loved the sheet because I figured out how to game the system. I knew all the tricks, the activities that would require the least amount of work to get the biggest payout. And he had special rules where if you got successive 5 weeks in a row over a certain number of points, you would get a bonus payout. And I got to the point where I played it so well that my dad changed the payout schedule because he said that I was bleeding him dry. And it was funny, though, because on the flip side, my brother, he was the complete opposite. He hated the sheet. He didn't even want to partake or anything like that. So he would never get any pocket money paid out through the sheet. And that was like one of my very early memories of, this idea of someone who embraced the system and the game and then played it all out versus someone who decided to opt out. And that some of those early lessons have stuck with me.
I mean, we're talking, guys, what we're doing is, like if you hurt your brother with or without reason, that minus 25 points.
That's correct.
Calling, actively provoking or continuing a dispute, that's a minus 10. Waking parents up, except in an emergency, that's minus 10 points. Is he a military guy, your old man, or what?
He was actually like what he would write when he would be flying into a country. He would write systems engineer, so he would actually design systems for large corporates that he was working for or employed by. So I only really look back on that, and it's kind of a little bit of a revelation. I'd not really thought too much about it. I just happened to get into systems and was a systems thinker. And then I kind of went, where did this come from? And then I dug into it, and then I went, hang on, I'm the son of a systems engineer.
Oh, mate, if this doesn't pre-qualify you as a systemologist,
that's right,
writes a book on systemology, I don't know what is. I mean, this is boot camp for kids. It's unreal. Can I ask your age? Is this an 80s thing or is it a 90s thing? Or
that would have been. Well, I was born in 81, so yeah, I'm just coming up to 40. Just now. So it's, some people go, I feel for your kids because I've got 2 young little ones at the moment. But my version of the sheet that we have for them, it's much more simplistic. We kind of, I started to find this balance between you can over-engineer systems to the point where they meet resistance and people don't follow them. And that's what most people do. They overcook the system. So I'm trying to find that balance between the two.
Yeah. I don't know whether that would be called bullying or harassment or abuse these days, but I'll tell you what, that's you grew up in a McDonald's-like household. I found that fascinating. My, one of the what we do every morning, we wake up at 4:30. I've got a system now. Thank you very much. Is getting up at 4:30 on this road to crossing off this big bucket list challenge, 52 books in 52 weeks. Let's just say it started at kind of War and Peace, and now I reckon it's going to end up at Mr. Men books, mate. The cat sat on that. But we get up at 4:30, have a coffee. I read out loud, and this is how I read. I read with a book, and I read with a 4-color pen, and read out loud. My partner Tracy, she's an artist. She sketches while I read out loud, and we had a good laugh. I must admit, when we got to the appendix, and we had a good laugh over that upbringing. So,
mate, there's definitely been like when I look back historically across my business career, systems has really been consistent all the way through. It might not have been front and
Yeah.
center, but I used to be in the stock market education space, and we would design trading systems where you would write entry and exit signals, so you would take some of the emotion out of trading. So that's part of it.
Yeah.
I owned a rock and roll clothing music store, and we franchised that first store. We got it up to 3 stores. We had, I mean, you're from Melbourne, so we had one on Bridge Road, one on Elizabeth Street, and one in Greensboro Plaza.
Yeah, I remember them. I think I bought some T-shirts from there back in the day.
Yeah, so it's Planet 13. That's right. So I've had that all the way through, but it was strange. I got to my last business, and for whatever reason, I thought, no, this business is different. It can't be systemized. And I just got stuck in that business probably for about 10 years too long. And that's when I was like, what are these mind games? Like, I'm a systems guy. I know this. I've seen this, but I somehow tricked myself into thinking my last business was different. And then I had to retest and challenge some assumptions to get the breakthrough.
It was a massive refresh for me reading this book. Some background. My first business was in the personal fitness training industry, and I franchised that. I was one of the first to franchise personal training studios in Australia. We got to a chain of 22 personal training studios around Australia. Then I defranchised the whole thing, and now I'm in licensing, certified bucket list coach around the world. So just gone from domestic to international. There's been a massive learning curve, but the good and the bad part of this story is the fact that the first business book I ever read was The E-Myth by your mate Michael Gerber.
Yep.
Which totally ruined my life in a good way. Yes. And then so I always had that sort of systems and engineering kind of mindset around business, and that leverage, never. And I had to learn it pretty quickly because I was a great personal trainer but shit business person. So I had to learn how to systemize. And I only franchise personal training because someone actually said you can't franchise personal training. And I said, well, I'm going for it here. And I won't say I did everything correctly, but that was that Michael Gerber inspiration back in the day was hugely. What's your story? What was your aha moment with the great man Michael Gerber? And I know that he forwarded your book, which is awesome. And what was the epiphany there for you?
I definitely have had quite a few interactions with Michael over the time in various different capacities. The one I talk about in the book is where we worked really closely together. And I did get some amazing insights and epiphanies from that point of view. When I was working with him, one thing that he gave me the okay to realize, he's known as the systems guy or the godfather of business systems for small business. And when I worked with him, I very quickly found out he is not a detail-orientated, process-driven person. Even though he's known as the systems guy, he is actually a very big picture thinker, and he's the visionary. Like we talk a little bit about, rocket fuel at the start, and we talk about the visionary and the integrator. He is very much a visionary. So even though he's known as the systems guy, he's not actually a systems guy. That was a huge insight for me to realize. You don't have to see yourself as a systems person or like documentation to own a business that is systems driven. Like I don't get excited by writing out detailed systems and processes. But what I fell in love with, the result that business systems brings to a business. And that's what I wrote Systemology for. It's to speak to the visionary to say, hey, you can do this. I've done this. I'm like you. I'm not a systems, I don't love writing systems and processes, but it's very achievable for you.
Very much easier too. We'll go through some of the tools and the ways you do it in a second, but I want to just bring, Anafi, thanks, mates. Two legends playing together. You obviously know David too, mate. Thanks a lot for playing along. What are the 4 stages of business systemization that that you break down, which is really interesting? And I want to know where in that 4-system kind of process are the biggest roadblocks that you see for people?
In each, and each will, each stage has some different challenges that you overcome.
Yeah.
So a good way to think about it, I talk about it in the book, The 4 Stages of Business Systemization. It's a pyramid, and at the base of the pyramid, level 1, you're in survival mode. And the whole idea in survival mode is you're extremely reactionary in business. You know, it's wherever the biggest fire is, that gets your attention. It's feast or famine. It's, you know, I'm needing to get a new client to win work so then I can start doing the work, and then you just focus on doing the work, and once you finish the work, then you need to think about getting the next job. So it's this feast or famine cycle. Probably the biggest thing, though, that holds the business owner in this survival mode is them not really recognizing that they are the bottleneck and they are actually the problem. When you at least get the insight, it's like that being unconsciously incompetent. But at least when you become, consciously incompetent, you can move up to the next level. And the next level is what I call stationary. And stationary is all about, it's almost like you're spinning plates. It usually means you're very dependent on particular team members, whether that's yourself or other team members. All of the IP is trapped up in their head, which means if they're off sick, then nothing really happens. That particular part of the business stalls out. Because of that person dependency, that's actually what keeps you stationary, because it's like you reach the invisible glass ceiling in your business where everybody's kind of maxed out. We can't really grow beyond the team because all of the IP is trapped in the heads of those team members. And that's probably what really holds you. And I don't know if you want to talk about each stage as we go through, or I can explain all of the stages.
Look, I love these stages, and they are ringing true. And there's so many, in the past 12 months, and you've probably got better stats around this than I have, but there's been because of the pandemic, there's been so many people who have started businesses, side hustles, whatever it is. And I dare say they'll be in those first 2 stages, for a long time before even thinking about the maybe the bigger picture. What are the two next ones? It's scalability,
scalability, and saleable. So to move through from stationary, the key is to extract the IP, to capture what's getting done from those team members' heads, whether it's you or other team members. And then you move into the next stage up, which is called scalable. Scalable is usually where you have a patchy solution. So you have some systems in some departments, but it's not a complete system. And usually the systems are scattered everywhere. They're in someone's Dropbox, they're in another person's Google Drive, they're in someone's project management platform. So they're a little bit everywhere. You kind of have something, but the tools are a bit clunky. There's no centrally organized knowledge base of how the business runs that covers all of the different departments: sales, HR, finance, management, marketing, operations. That's that stage. A lot of people, when they get to that stage, they actually end up staying at that stage because they go, we've got systems in place. And they think they've actually reached the pinnacle of a systemized business because, we've kind of ticked that box. It's more of ticking a box as opposed to a cultural shift, which is what happens in the final stage.
So is it about, like, you're wearing all these hats, the HR, the finance, the marketing, the sales, you're wearing all these hats as a small business owner to start off with. And I dare say, it's one by one, getting rid of each hat, systemizing that path to follow. What is the hat that I guess that you find a lot of small business owners give away too early, or should give away maybe first?
Oftentimes what happens is that the business owner is very strong in one or two areas. Maybe they're a great salesperson. Maybe they're a great marketer. Maybe they're great at doing the work. And it'll vary from every different business. But usually what ends up being the business's strength ends up becoming the business's weakness. Because the business owner is so strong at it, usually that's one of the last things that they let go. But the business owner, as the business grows, gets very busy and they're juggling lots of different hats. So then they underperform at certain areas as well. So when is the right time to let go? I think depending on where you're at, one of the first things I like to look at is we think about our business as a collection of systems, and certain things need to happen in your business for it to function. You got to get leads. You got to sell those leads. You got to deliver the product. You got to get them to come back. If there is any point in that cycle where the business owner actively avoids or dislikes or self-sabotages by not doing it, that's a great place to start, because sometimes the business owner...
I think you've just outlined about 90% of the stuff that I do.
Because what happens is that...
I love doing this stuff, mate. This doesn't pay to me. This is great.
What ends up happening is the business owner might consciously or subconsciously do this. They might have a great product or service, and they know, though, maybe they're not the great with the delivery of the work, or they haven't got the operations side dialed in, but they're a great salesperson. What ends up happening is they might start to sabotage the sales process, because in their head, they're like, if I get another client, that's going to equal pain because I have to do work. When what should be happening is, if the operations, if you've got scalable delivery, the business owner might be able to lean into sales and marketing and just sell the crap out of it because they believe in it, they're passionate about it, and they know that they can actually deliver on the promises that they're making in their marketing. So
true.
It will vary. But so when I work with business owners, sometimes we try and have a look at where some of those pain points are, or we think about sometimes if they're in a very creative business, we say, well, let's remove everything around whatever the most creative piece is. So if, let's say, they owned a video production business and they're editing the videos, well, we'll say, let's remove everything else. How you set up the project, how you communicate with the client, how you take payments, how you, systemize everything else and leave the creative part until last. So there's a few different strategies. It just depends on where the business owner's up to.
It's just a micro version of this. We're doing a podcast right now, Bucket List Life, and my bottleneck, because I have some interesting authors that I want to chat to. There's a heap of people I want to chat to, and I fell out of love for doing podcasts because of the post production, and it's probably not the first time you've heard of that, mate. Is just the process of doing the audiograms and the writing of the copy and putting it up on the platform, et cetera, then putting it out on social media, then through your database and blah blah. So upon finishing your book, I immediately turned to one of my guys and said, "You're doing this end to end. What I'm going to do is I'm going to StreamYard, which is what we're on right now, and as soon as I hit stop on this, I'm done." Whereas, and it's now got rid of the bottleneck. Now I feel free to go and create and do, well, I won't say what I do best, but this bit.
Yes.
And what's really cool, it's going to make for a better experience, and it's way better, in someone else's wheelhouse than mine, because I've witnessed so many times where I've been the bottleneck. Quick story. When I turned 30, and I guess the importance of business systems to all, the people that follow me and follow David, this just reinforces it. I went surf. I'm a surfer. And when I turned 30, me and my mates went and lived on a boat for 2 or 3 weeks over the Mentawai Islands and surfed the Mentawai Islands off the coast of Indonesia. And we lived on the boat, no internet, no nothing, just it was on a boat in the middle of nowhere. And I was absolutely shitting myself before, because I had the personal training businesses going, and I was really on the tools as well, and in terms of management as well. And I was just shitting myself, and it was coming down to the wire when we had to actually leave Australia and get on the boat. So I left it to one of my guys. I kind of wrote some systems out back in the day before Asana and before all these online tools that we love. And I just left it. And I remember getting on the plane going, oh my God, I'm not going to have a business when I get back. Anyway, as soon as you got over there, got some waves, got some barrels, came back, didn't even think about business, didn't really check in at all. Come back, and literally Melbourne Airport on the Sunday night, full tanned, boards in hand, open up my phone. It's my accountant, who's also my bookkeeper at the time. And so Sally goes, look, I'm like, saw a message, please call me. And I'm like, oh, shit. And just all the brownness went white, and I just shit myself. I thought, we're screwed here. And so I had, a lot of employees and stuff like that working, but getting this call was just just brought me back down to earth in the middle of winter in Melbourne after being on a boat, having a great time with my best mates. Anyway, she said, come around to my house straight away. So I was in Hawthorne at the time, and she lived in Camberwell. I'm like, all right, cool. Went straight from the airport to her house, and she's gone, I've got something to show you. And she put the P&Ls in front of me for the month of May. And that was my birthday, my 30th birthday. I went, Sally, these look really good. She said, exactly. They're your best ever, and you weren't here. And I just went, you are kidding. So she basically said, fuck off again. Just leave us to run this thing. And it was such a turning point in my business life where I really believed in delegating more, trusting other people, and just kind of getting out of the way. And so that's why this book, for me, mate, was just, it brought me back to that place. And it was a really good, redefining moment for it as well, and for the re-systemization of this new business as well. I want to talk about this trap of good enough. You talk about it in your book about good enough. We fall into this, don't we? It's quite common. How do we go from, everything's good, this is good enough, maybe consciously or unconsciously? How do we get past that onto the next stage?
I think the biggest myth or conclusion that a lot of business owners have come to, and it's sad, this is one of the things I'm trying to redefine, is this idea that you should systemize like McDonald's. And there's a lot of people that when you say, what does a systemized business look like? They'll say, oh, it's Subway. Oh, it's McDonald's. It's these franchised businesses that have spent the last 60 years developing their systems and their processes. And you're looking at the end product of a business that's been designed to take 15-year-old kids and train them how to flip hamburgers. And then you're saying that's the way that I should systemize my business. And that's a huge part of the problem. There's, people, when I say what is a business system, they'll imagine these big, thick manuals that McDonald's University gives their employees when they go through to train them up in hamburgerology. And that picture is really what cripples the business owner who doesn't like business systems at the best of times, let alone add in this picture that is just so far from the truth. I think what people need to think about, I'll often reference the movie The Founder, which tells the story of the Ray Kroc brothers and Ray Kroc and the McDonald's brothers, and how that business got started. At the start of the movie, when they're mapping out the first system, the floor of the store, they go out
kitchen,
and they basically go out onto a basketball court with some chalk, and they map out the store on the basketball court, and they say, let's not put the fryer here. Let's not put the thick shake machine here. Let's put the griller over here and the registers here. And they're moving things around. That is actually version 1 of a system. So I think a big part of what I try and do as well is systemology re-engineers or reshapes the way that people think about systems, because all of the methodologies that have come before it, like Six Sigma and Lean, they are all process improvement methodologies. But that assumes you have a process to improve. But if you don't yet have a process, where do you start? So systemology is actually about capturing what are you currently doing? What is the best form of what you're currently doing, and get everybody up to that standard? And how do we do it simply? How do we use Loom and your iPhone and screen recording and just capture it raw and consider that version 1? And that's okay. So that's a big part of the reshaping of the thinking.
Yeah. Cool. Do people get tracked in this good enough for a long time, and then get to maybe the end of their maybe end of their business life, and then realize, oh shit, I want to exit this thing, and then realize they haven't systemized and their way out of it and should have done it earlier?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's if you think about these stages that you go through in business, and as the business grows, what just ends up happening for a lot of business owners is they get stuck in one of the stages. They didn't learn the lesson that they needed to move through to that next level. And oftentimes you might not think about business systemization. It's a bit like insurance. You don't think about it and it's till it's too late. If you had the emergency where something happens to you as the business owner, or one of your team members, they get hit by a bus, or one of their family members does and they can't report in, you only realize it's an issue sometimes at that point in time, and you'll go, wow, I spent my entire life building up this business that really is just so person dependent. It's all stuck in my head. I'm ready to retire, or something happens to my health, and now I don't actually have anything to sell. That's a horrible place to make that realization.
Sad. Very sad. Yeah, I hate the thought of that. And it's like systemizing a business, kind of like an insurance policy, isn't it? It's the best way to start start immediately. Just quickly, I'm encouraging people to obviously go out and get the book as well. So, mate, just real quick, go around the circle, the systemology framework, the 7 stages. What are they? No need to go into crazy detail because, we don't want to do spoiler here. But what are they? I mean, you go in a clockwise direction here.
Yeah, definitely. Happy to do the spoiler. Like, I'll give everyone what it is that they need to get the insight. When I read the E-Myth, which we referenced earlier, and the same with Traction and Scaling Up and Built to Sell, all of those books got me really excited about what systems could do. I knew they were important, but always where it fell short was, okay, what do I do now? What are the first systems I create?
What we're talking about here, guys, just to give it a visual, if you are watching this on YouTube, we're talking about these 7 stages here.
So systemology is the 7-step process to systemize a business, to go from I don't have any systems in place to having the minimum viable product, the minimum number of systems that required to run your business. So step number 1 is about identifying what are the 10 to 15 systems that you should start with. If you don't know where to start, what is the first system that you should start with? And we've got a method we call the critical client flow. It's about mapping the customer and the business journey to deliver a core product or service. So basically the goal of stage 1, like if we think about it, if we can get the business to the point where it can make money without having any key person dependency, or doesn't require the business owner, that's a tremendous breakthrough. So step 1 is define. Step number 2 is assign. That is about thinking, where does that knowledge in the business currently exist? So after you know what the 10 to 15 systems are, who knows how to do those things? Maybe it's Sally who knows how to issue out an invoice. So let's chat with Sally and find out how she's issuing that invoice. Or maybe it's John who answers the phone or handles the incoming inquiry or lead. So basically identifying and pairing up, here are the systems we need. who knows how to do those things. Where we can, we try and avoid the business owner as much as we can. Then we move to step number 3, which is then we need to extract the knowledge. So there's a few secrets to make this easy, because you could rule with an iron fist and say, all right, team members, it's required that you document your systems or you're fired. That's one way to do it. But a better way to do it is understanding that some of your best team members are busy, and some of your best team members might not like writing systems and processes. So you want to make it easy for them, and understanding that it's a 2-person job. You have the person who has the knowledge, and then you have another person who ends up recording it and helping to document it. So that's the extraction phase. Step number 4 is then the organize phase. How do we then take that knowledge, and where do we store it, and how do we link it together with your project management platform, so that way you've got clear accountability, who is doing what by when, and that wraps up the organize. Then we move to step number 5, which is the integrate stage. That's all about how do we then get the buy-in from the team? How do you overcome resistance? How do you reach the point that the team says, this is how we do things here? That's the goal of that particular stage. Then we move into step number 6, which is the scale stage. So after we've captured the critical client flow, which we identified in step number 1, then stage number 6 is, what other systems do you need to scale your business? Do you need systems to recruit and onboard and manage staff? Do you need some more financial systems or some management systems? We just have a process to identify those. And then the final stage is the optimize stage. And this speaks exactly what I was talking to earlier about this whole McDonald's idea. Don't try and optimize and make things perfect up front. It's designed in systemology to be the last stage in the process by design. The reason I wanted to do that is because I want you to capture everything as you're currently doing it, best practice, make that version 1, make that base level. And it's not until we get to the final stage that we then go, we keep on losing people. We get leads, but our conversion's rubbish. Okay, well, let's focus in on our sales process. Or, we keep on, getting people in and we sell them, but then they're always disgruntled at the end because maybe the marketing team or the sales team overpromised what we could deliver, and then we didn't set the expectations correctly as we were onboarding them. So maybe we need to work on that piece. So when you get to this final stage, it's more of like a doctor. You're looking for symptoms, and then you start to look for the system solution. But those 7 stages, it's define, assign, extract, organize, scale, and then optimize.
Fantastic, mate. I love the systemology framework. It's so simple. And what you've done in the book is really broken it down into a very non-McDonald's kind of way. And I remember the 2 first manuals that I created. I've seen the McDonald's manuals, and they're huge. And I thought I did my first ones, and they're about this thick. And then I saw them, they've got to be thicker. Back in the day, before all the apps and everything else. But the cool thing is you've made this really digital. You've made this really doable, and that can be done by any business, no matter how big or how small. And even if you're on the tools, I just got a reference here. What's the DRTC? Just as a reference, you mentioned the DRTC, which is fantastic, I reckon.
In each of the different stages, there are some different tools that we've developed to help you complete that stage. So the first one we mentioned in stage number 1 being the critical client flow, the CCF, that we touched on that. That's that customer and business journey. And then the next stage, which is the assign stage, covers the DRTC, which is the departments, roles, and team chart. The whole point of this is to translate what we've identified as the systems into starting to think about your business in terms of different departments, and thinking about where the knowledge exists on how to complete those different steps. So it's just really a tool for starting to pair those two things up, which is, where is the knowledge? Ideally, we want to get the business owner out of the equation, because that's another issue that often happens. The business owner wants things done to a certain standard. They think they're the only person who can do it to a particular standard. So they think they have to be the ones that create the systems. And that's the same level of thinking that's trapping them in the position that they're in right now anyway. So what we try and do is we break that by saying, even if it's not perfect just yet, that's okay. If you just figure out who can do it best and bring everybody up to that standard, and the business owner didn't have to do that, tremendous win.
Advice for people, some people that I may or may not know quite closely, for visionary perfectionists, any quick tips for those sort of people? So I'll pass these tips on to them.
That's right. Particularly for those, because I'm one of those two. So I speak to this person. I speak from a position of authority on this. One of the things that you can do is, as part of your recruiting process, find people who have a little bit of OCD, obsessive compulsiveness, organized, checklist-driven people. Like, if you surround yourself with those people and you make it as part of your recruitment, you actually make this infinitely easier for yourself. Is that the great Casey Golan?
Casey tuning
super rock solid.
Oh, Case, we go. Casey was actually one of my first business coaches back in the day.
Mine too.
When I franchise personal training. So, Case, stoked to connect with you, mate. Here on LinkedIn, the Bucket List Live podcast. We'll have to connect. How's that triathlon career going too, mate? I'll just both triathletes. We grew up swimming together, so just fun fact. So, Case, thanks a lot for jumping on, mate.
Very good.
So. Awesome. Look, I love. I tell you what, I've done a little highlight of this. I love this story. Right now there's a lot of us in lockdown. A lot of us, maybe operators who who wear every hat of the business. And I love this story of motivation that you've got on page 92 about how to motivate, look at how to get motivated. And you may or may not recall this, mate, but I just love this story because there's
I know the one.
Right now we're all looking for motivation, right? Maybe you better tell it. It's the
I know the one.
Parking fine.
I know the one.
Parking
I
fine.
know the one.
You tell it. I won't spoil it. But I've just gone LOL on that one. And
I have this.
I tell you what, talk about this. This is pain motivated. This is unreal. Go for it.
So I have this friend who fantasized over the idea of being a business owner. He used to work in a corporate job, and then he thought, nah, I'm just going to pull the pin. I'm going to start up my own business. So he starts off, and he kind of, when he first launches the business at home, he's finding he's having trouble getting motivated. Like, he hops out of bed at like 12 o'clock. He's slow to start. No one's looking over his shoulder. He's used to being in the corporate world where there's the pressure of, you've got to rock up or you're going to get fired, and that's not there. So he's having trouble self-motivating. So he comes up with this brilliant idea. He lived on a road in South Yarra called Punt Road. It's just sort of
Punt Road. That's like the worst one.
Correct. So he lived on Punt Road, and what he ended up doing is he thought, I need to get up every morning and I got to get out of bed. What's the best way I can do it? And he decided to park his car on Punt Road, which becomes a clear way at, I think it's about 7:30 in the morning.
7:30 in the morning.
On an extremely busy thoroughfare. Like, we're talking, this is a road that basically leads into Melbourne CBD, and it banks up. So he parks his car out there because he knew if he didn't get up to move the car in the morning, they would come and tow that car. So what he created this positive constraint for himself to force himself to get out of bed. Otherwise, he'd lose his car.
I love that story, man. Like, I love that. And now that you say it's Punt Road in Melbourne, it's one thing getting a parking ticket, it's one thing getting towed away, but you probably have, I don't know, 10,000 haters in that peak hour traffic as well, trying to exit your house from then 100%. On. Oh, my God. Talk about it. So, guys, that might be, look, you don't need Anthony Robbins. You just need to park somewhere to get motivated and potentially get towed away. Look, Mo, I could talk for hours about this. Look, guys, go out. It is a great book. It's a great refresher. It has been ages, Casey. G'day, mate. And yeah, from what all of our coaches of the past have taught us, everyone knows about business systems, and I think this is a really cool time to get that refresher and get some new up-to-date information. So that's why I do recommend Systemology. Dave, you've done an amazing job with the book, mate. I will reread it, and that's what it's all about. You're always refining this stuff as a business owner. Lastly, I asked this question of all my guests before we sign off, mate. Imagine a stadium full of people, and up the front, big raised stage, big booming microphone. What would you love to say, and who do you choose to be in the audience?
I think, it's the same thing. Even when I hop on your podcast right now, I have that feeling like I'm speaking to that audience. My whole goal here is if I can ignite the fire in the business owner for the idea of business systems, to get them to re-look at business systems and what they think to be true about them, and get them to question some of the assumptions, and to reach the point that they can say, I might not be a systems person or see myself as a systems person, but I can imagine having a systemized business, because I've seen the difference between a business that runs with systems versus one that runs without systems, and it's a night and day difference. So I just hope that the business owner falls in love with not the process of business systemization, but they fall in love with the result of what business systems can bring. And that, if I could achieve that in front of that stadium, then that would be, mission accomplished.
Guys, Systemology. I'll put up the website. There it is. It's www.systemology.com. Check it out. Connect with David. Also through the socials. How can people? What social media drug of choice do you hang out on mostly these days, mate?
Probably most frequent would be LinkedIn, but we have a YouTube channel and Twitter and a couple of other ones, Facebook and stuff. But LinkedIn these days is probably where most of the action happens.
You can say TikTok. There's no shame in that.
That's right.
Mate, thanks once again for jumping on the show, guys. Absolute gold mine of knowledge, massive refresher to all your entrepreneurs or wannabe entrepreneurs out there. And I think now is a great time to get David's book, Systemology, and recreate, recalibrate, and take the opportunity while we can to really build out and optimize what we do, our business plan. To spit out the time flow and the cash flow that we need to go and do our bucket list. That's what it's all about. So an optimized business should produce those two resources to allow us to go and live the life that we want to, our bucket list life. And that's the reason for this podcast, and that's the reason why I got David on. So, guys, if you haven't done already, subscribe on YouTube, and you'll get more of these delivered straight through to you. Share it on LinkedIn, share it on Facebook as well. Instagram, Twitter, etc. But all in all, thanks a lot for joining in, and to the people that joined in and sent questions in. Thanks so much for playing along, David. Absolute pleasure, mate. And until next time, guys. Thanks a lot for tuning in to the Bucket List Life podcast. Cheers.
Thanks so much for listening to the Bucket List Life podcast with the world's #1 bucket list expert, Trav Bell. For more great content, go to www.thebucketlistguy.com.